Transmitter device activated. Coordinates set for Earth 2.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Earth 2 podcast, your weekly exploration of the DC Comics multiverse and the legacy of their Golden Age characters through the Silver and the Bronze Ages of comics. I'm Private Peter Watson.
And I'm Extremely Private David Steele. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. We return very quickly to the pages of Brave and the Bold this week. This time we're reading the lead story from issue 117, published on the 19th of November 1974. And this issue features Sgt Rock. It's the fourth appearance of Sgt Rock in Brave and the Bold after the Neil Adams one, the striped pants one, and that weird one with the sort of ghosty, spooky guy and selling souls and all that.
The one where Batman's trapped down a well and accidentally sells his soul to Hitler.
That's right, that one.
Yes.
So, and obviously, if you're a regular listener, you'll know that we're doing all the Sgt Rock issues of Brave and the Bold because they have sort of contrary evidence as to which Earth Sgt Rock might have been on. He's obviously a World War II centric character. In World War II is when obviously the majority of the Golden Age superheroes were active, and we're doing all the Sgt Rock ones to sort of map them out and sort of go, right, is this Sgt Rock on Earth 2 or is he Earth 1 or what? Because there's one Brave and the Bold that we'll get to in a year or two from now probably that really, there's no two ways about it. There was an Earth 2 Sgt Rock because he has a story with Earth 2 Batman, but we're going to get to that one. In the meantime, we're mapping all the other ones just so we can go, how does this contradict or how does this tie up with? And obviously, Peter loves these mental Bob Haney 70s stories.
Some more than others.
Yeah, so it's fun to do that. At this point, we sort of decided that the first Sgt Rock Brave and Bold story was most likely on Earth 2.
Yes.
Because it took place pointedly during World War II and Batman's yellow oval wasn't
predominant.
Yes, that's the word I was struggling for. But then we decided that the next two were probably on Earth 1 because it was manifestly and clearly the contemporary Earth 1 Batman and Rock was a bit older and they seemed to have a bit of a relationship. And I think you remember you worked out slight contradictions between the Neil Adams one and the striped pants one as to what was happening and stuff. Yeah,
because Batman never actually met Easy Company in the first story, but they seem to know each other in the second story. So yes, it's an untold story perhaps.
It's a difficult one doing these because we could just skip ahead and read that issue of Brave and the Bold. That's like 140 odd, 150 odd, whichever issue it is. But half the fun, I think, is just spotting the contradictions.
Yeah.
How does this work before we get there? Because it might be we get to that one and it'll answer all our questions and all our problems and clearly define everything that's going on. But until we get there.
Yeah. Show you're working, that's what we say.
Exactly.
Yes.
And it means, listeners can have the joy of listening to all the Sgt Rock episodes back to back and sort of go, And you said this last time, get on with it. So we all got on with it. And Peter will tell you about the cover.
It's a DC 100 pages for only 60 cents banner at the top. The Brave and the Bold, number 117. March approved by the Comics Code Authority, thank goodness. Batman and Sgt Rock. Now, I'm going to tell you about the other stories that feature in this 100-pager first before I get to the Sgt Rock bits. Meet the Secret Six, codename Mockingbird. And there's a small panel featuring the Secret Six. Yes, interestingly coloured, to be honest. Very nice. Viking Prince hunts another foul in Trail of the Black Falcon. And you have the Viking Prince on a raft with someone else on it. Is that a damsel in distress, I think?
Looks like it.
And they're being attacked by a giant one-eyed octopus. Gasp.
Or is it giant squid? Who can say?
Giant squid.
It's an octopus. I'm going to flick and actually... Oh, yeah, there we go. Oh, that's interesting. In the story, this reprinted version, the octopus is sort of orangey gold colour, but on the cover here he's purple. So make of that what you will, listeners.
Also in this issue, Blackhawk battles menace from inner space. And also, 1001 ways to defeat Green Arrow, plus superheroes, super warriors. But we're not going to talk about any of those stories.
Nope, sadly not.
Instead, we're going to talk about these Batman Sgt Rock story, New Nightmare Without End. And the panel highlighting this, there's a full moon, giant full moon looming in the background.
Oh my goodness.
So take a drink.
Take a very big drink.
There's a soldier, a ragged soldier with a hood over his head who looks like he's maybe escaped being tied to a pole. And he's reaching forward for Sgt Rock, who has got a gun out and it looks like he's actually executing him firing squad style. But zooming in from off panel on a motorbike is Batman, who says, "Stop, Rock! You executed that coward once. You can't kill his ghost."
Gosh. A lot to unpack there, because as you say, the man standing next to the post, his uniform is in tatters, it's hanging off him in rags, and as you say, there's ropes around his wrists, and Rock does not look happy, and he's firing straight into the chest, and I think Batman's a bit late with that proclamation, to be honest.
Ever so slightly, yeah.
So, as usual, as I say a lot at this time, we'll have to pay close attention to see if that scene actually happens in the story. So we have an opening contents page, which features an image of Sergeant Rock from the last time he was in Brave and the Bold, from the cover of his previous appearance. But I've not been able to work out the origin of the image of Batman. So if you know where that image of Batman comes from, you can perhaps reply to a tweet or something and let us know. Shall we read the little blurb from the contents page?
The Brave and Bold presents Batman and Sgt Rock. 30 years ago, Rock executed a man for cowardice, and today he's being court-martialed for it. It's up to his old buddy Batman and the Joes of Easy Company to crack this complex case before it turns into a nightmare without end.
Yeah, so spoilers there. We'll see how long it takes us to catch up with how much we're told in that little bit of text at the start by jumping into the story properly. So our opening splash image has the Batman and Sgt Rock logos, and it's a very moody image with Batman sloping along a street, and he's looking up at a large poster, which we'll come to in a sec, because we're going to have a little bit of captioning.
Down dark cobbled streets prowls a famed figure, the Batman, who in the arc light's grim glare suddenly comes face to face with...
And Batman thinks...
Sgt Rock!
And Batman is thinking Sgt Rock because the poster is one of those army recruitment style posters which features an image of Sergeant Rock, pointing at the viewer of the poster, so to speak. And the text on the poster reads, Sergeant Rock wants you for today's army. So Batman takes all this in, and he continues to think.
My old friend. Well, looks like Rock's fallen into soft duty recruiting for Uncle Sam. Good. He deserves it. Wherever you are this night, Rock, I salute you.
We get a little bit more captioning.
And while a great city sleeps, secure in the knowledge that its legendary guardian is on the job, 4 sinister forms close in, and thus begins the brave and bold adventure that threatens to entrap an entire nation in the Nightmare Without End.
And we're told the story is by...
Bob Haney, writer, Jim Aparo, artist.
I love the little caption there that reads, a DC quality magazine.
Yes.
Lovely. Right. We're still not finished describing this opening splash image, listeners. Bats is taking in the poster, but unseen by Bats, lurking round the corner, in fact lurking round another corner, we can see that Batman is being observed by 4 shadowy men, all in big coats with the collars turned up and wearing hats. And then we arrive at the top of story page 2 and another caption that reads, Part 1, The Haunted Sergeant. And Bats is being jumped, quite frankly, by the 4 men in hats and big coats. A couple of them make a grab for him, and Bats realises what's going on and says,
Oh, no you don't.
And with a thwack in panel 2, he kicked one of them and sent him flying back, and then with a quam. Quam, which is a Scottish acronym, it stands for Ken What I Mean. So obviously that guy knows what Batman means when he kicks him in the face. So yes, Batman slaps the other guy, sending him back as a couple more of his assailants grapple with him, and then we get another caption.
4 against 1 are fair odds for the masked manhunter, until a huge fist lands like a sledgehammer.
Yes, and indeed, one guy in a purple coat and brown leather gloves manages to land a punch in Batman's jaw, and honestly, the way it's laid out here, the fist looks huge.
Yeah.
Massive. And then, in the next panel, the big lad in the purple coat with a rip tears down the poster of Sergeant Rock. Interesting. A slow dissolve.
Soon the car carrying Batman's limp form reaches an airfield outside Gotham City, where a plane awaits, its engines idling.
Yes, we see the aeroplane, and we see a green saloon car on the tarmac beside it, and a few figures standing beside the car, and they're obviously carrying Batman out of the car towards the aforementioned aeroplane.
And like some great bird of prey, with its victim stored in its belly, the plane roars off into the night sky. Inside, a dazed man awakes and peers up at 4 stern faces surrounding him.
Yes, Batman comes to and we see his assailants all still wearing their hats and big coats with their collars turned up. And Bats looks around and says,
Where? What? You? I know you.
And we see that the big lad in the purple coat, who knocked Batman out in the previous page, has taken off his coat and his hat and has revealed a familiar face who Batman identifies as...
You're Bulldozer of Easy Company, Sergeant Rock's buddy.
Right, and these are all easy Joes too. Sorry we had to jump you like that, but we couldn't take a chance on you refusing to come with us. Our next stop is 3,000 miles across the big pond, Germany, because, Batman, Sergeant Rock needs you. To emphasise this, Bulldozer is holding up the poster that they tore off the wall, the recruitment poster with Sgt Rock and the phrase that he needs you for the army. Bats looks stunned, appalled, heavily surprised in the next panel as he says,
Rock needs me? But why?
Because right now he's a prisoner in an army stockade, waiting to be court-martialed for a dishonourable discharge. We get a nice aerial shot of the aeroplane in that way that Jim Parrow likes to do to annoy me, as we hear Batman saying,
What? Rock's the greatest soldier Uncle Sam ever had. A living legend.
Yeah, Batman. A living legend with only 6 stripes. A sergeant's still just a sergeant, even Rock. All we know, he's in heavy trouble with the brass and needs help. We figured a smart operator like you could save the career of the top kick of them all.
I see. It's all pretty mysterious, but I'll do what I can.
Great shot of Batman looking very thoughtful. A slow dissolve and another caption.
Next morning, a US base near the border between West and East Germany, where 2 armies, 2 ways of life, confront each other in a long, tense, Cold War.
Batman's in the office of a senior military officer. It's a general balding chap with a moustache, standing in front of a map, which we can see. We can see West Germany written on it, and we can see Berlin picked out as well. All very useful. The officer is saying, I can't refuse your permission to see the prisoner, Batman, but I warn you, it'll do you no good. His army career's over. He's washed up.
Shortly, a cell in the stockade as 2 friends are reunited.
Yep, it's a very scrappy-looking cell. We can see a sink. We can see a sort of a small bed. There's a military policeman standing behind Batman who looks at the occupant of the cell and says,
Rock!
and then thinks,
My God, he looks awful. A haggard ghost of himself.
And the Rock, who's smoking a cigarette, letting him smoke in prison. Gosh. The Rock turns and says, Hi, Batman. Thanks for coming. But it's no use. I'm a crazy old retread the army doesn't want anymore.
Crazy? What are you talking about? Tell me the whole story.
You'll never believe it. Nobody does. You ever heard of Private Eddie Slovic?
Sure. He was the only soldier executed for cowardice during World War II.
Correction. There were 2 GIs shot for cowardice in the big war. I ought to know. I personally executed the other one. Corporal Dan Cathcart. Listeners have to get out of the way. Cathcart is an area of Glasgow that's the next stop along the railway line from where I stay. So reading this through in preparation, all the references to Cathcart were hilarious. It's a treat of mine to get the Cathcart Circle train home in the evening sometimes, because it goes a different route and takes a little bit longer and it's very pleasant. So yes, if you live in Glasgow South Side, this is a very distracting element of the story. So we fall into flashback mode for the next page or so. First panel at the top of page 5 is a nice sort of rounded off, heavy black border as we see Sgt Rock and some other soldiers lying in the snow, in the thick of winter. Sgt Rock's narration reads, It all began during the Battle of the Bulge. Me and Easy Co were dug in just outside Bastogne. We see Sgt Rock calling to one of his colleagues, saying, The enemy can outflank us through those pines. Who's posted there, Bulldozer? He gestures and Bulldozer replies, The new guy, Sarge, Corporal Dan Cathcart. Rock's narration for the next panel. All Cathcart had to do was warn us if any Krauts was coming our way, but suddenly, we see a number of German soldiers firing on Easy Company.
Pow, 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 pow.
And Rock cries amongst all this, Krauts! That punk Cathcart never let a peep! Fire! Fire! Hold him, Easy! We figured Cathcart maybe was dead, but after we drove them joggers back, we found him. He was cowering with fear in a shelled-out house. And we see Cathcart, who looks much younger than everyone else, to be fair, obviously traumatised by what's going on. It's very unpleasant, but Rock and the others who arrived in Rock is saying, You gutless worm! I'm reporting you for court-martial, deserting your post and showing cowardice in the face of the enemy. Rock's narration. Cathcart was convicted, but I never dreamed the brass wouldn't commute his sentence to life imprisonment. We see Sgt Rock having a conversation with a senior officer. Rock looks slightly surprised or puzzled as he's saying, But General, sir, you want me to form a firing squad out of Easy Company and execute Cathcart?
That's an order, Sergeant.
So, one cold dawn in that old shadow courtyard, there I was with Corporal Dan Cathcart's eyes drilling me like bullet holes. We see that Cathcart has been tied to the firing post. We can see a soldier standing ready to tie a blindfold around his eyes. Soldiers lined up with their weapons, and we hear Rock saying, Firing squad, halt! His narration at the top of page 6. His screaming voice cut through above the officer in charge bellowing the final orders. We hear Cathcart screaming,
Rock, I'm innocent! Innocent!
And the chap in charge of the firing squad can be heard saying, Ready! Aim! Rock's narration. I knew one of our rifles was loaded with a blank. So any GI of us would think it wasn't him who fired the fatal slug. And then we hear the officer in charge yelling, Fire! And with a kapow, Rock fires his gun thinking, Make it be mine. It's gotta be mine, obviously referring to the blank. As they carried his body away, I suddenly felt the iron stare of a captured Nazi, one Colonel von Bock being led for questioning. We see Rock standing with the smoke coming out of his rifle, and the German officer being escorted past by a military policeman. The officer seems to be looking back at the Rock, and the Rock is thinking here, he's showing contempt for an army that shoots its own soldiers. But Cathcart was a coward. We had to do it. And then we're back in the present day with Batman and Sgt Rock, and Sgt Rock is finishing off saying, anyway, we still had a war to win, and I forgot about Cathcart. Forgot about him all these years since, until a month ago, I'm in a German beer hall. We get another heavily bordered panel in flashback. We see Sgt Rock with a glass in his hand, an ashtray in front of him, some other soldiers playing pool with the looks of things in the background, and Sgt Rock looking over his left shoulder as he spotted a figure going out the door of this drinking hall. Rock is startled and he thinks, huh? It's Cathcart. Final panel of page 6. Rock's narration continues. I ran outside after him, but he'd been swallowed by the night. You see Rock standing outside the beer hall. Some beautiful detail from Jim Aparo here. He's looking around and the sergeant's thinking, did I imagine it? Yeah, that's it. Had a few too many brews. Cathcart's been dead for years. Top of page 7, there's a few more rounded, bordered flashback panels as Sgt Rock narrates. But like a week later, the outfit's moving to a new assignment and they're on a train, obviously, and Rock's looking out the window and he sees, well, he thinks, it's him! Again! His narration continues. The easy jokes thought I'd fled my stripes when I tried to leap out a window. And we see the Sarge try to climb out the window of the train towards this figure that he's seen, and he's yelling, let me go, you apes! It's him! Cathcart! And we think it's Bulldozer who yells back at him saying, there's nobody there! Hold him, guys! And we see a guard down on the platform looking a bit puzzled. Maybe it's him that Rock is mistaken for Cathcart. But anyway, our final flashback panel, Rock's narration reads, maybe it was my imagination again, but just a few days later. And it looks to me like we're in some sort of supply room or space, whatever, because there's a soldier lying in the foreground on top of some boxes of filter cigarettes. He's obviously been punched out because we see Rock standing over this dark-haired man looking very stunned and surprised and uncomfortable, and a couple of military police rushing in as the guy on the floor yells,
arrest this man! He went berserk and struck an officer!
To which Rock says, Cathcart, he was here. You tried to stop me from grabbing him. And then we're back again in the present day with Sgt Rock looking out the window of his cell, his back to Batman, saying, that's when he threw the book at old Rock. Either I'm nuts and mentally unfit, or I'm to be tried and dishonourably discharged. Both ways, I'm finished as a soldier. Even in here, Cathcart's haunting me. But he's dead. I helped kill him, saw him die years ago in a courtyard. What's the answer, Batman? Help me.
Rock, old buddy.
And he thinks,
hard to believe, but looks like the Rock of Easy has cracked.
And the caption rounds out part 1, reading,
Has Rock, the hero of countless battles, cracked? The answer will rock you in part 2. Next.
Top of the next page, caption reads,
Part 2. Manhunt for a hero.
We like a manhunt round about these parts in these podcasts. It's been too long since we had any kind of manhunt or manhunter situation. It's weeks, in fact. Right. The caption for the first panel of page 8.
In a dim cell, a living legend who has never flinched in the face of battle or death sobs like a child.
Batman puts a comforting hand on Rock's shoulder as Rock is saying, I should never have reported Cathcart for cowardice. Lots of guys lost their guts briefly, then turned tiger again. I should have given the poor son of a gun a break.
No, Rock, don't accuse yourself.
Suddenly,
a close-up of Rock looking very alarmed as he yells, Look! Outside! Cathcart's ghost! Batman crosses to the window.
What? No one's out there. You're imagining it. And there's no such thing as ghosts.
You're wrong. He's here. Still haunting me. He's come back to get even.
The next instant,
there's a clang sound effect and Batman looks around to see...
Huh? Rock's gone. The cell door was unlocked. Guard! Guard!
But minutes later...
we're outside. We see a vehicle roaring off in the background as Batman and the general who we met earlier on are standing and can only look on. A military policeman is there too. He yells,
The prisoner stole a jeep, sir. I never thought he'd make a break.
General yells back at him. He's a danger to the entire army. Get after him. The first panel of page 9. See Batman almost sloping off quietly to himself as we can see the soldiers piling into trucks and getting ready to give chase. Bats is thinking,
why such a fuss over one old nom-com? And the general's words about Rock endangering the entire army? There's something more than Rock's personal troubles behind all this.
Soon on the Autobahn, cutting eastward through the German countryside.
Yep. Batman is scooting along on the motorbike that he sourced from the compound, and he looks down off the road and sees
the Jeep Rock stole in that ravine, but no sign of him.
30 minutes later,
Bat's still on the bike. He sees another large vehicle in front of him, and he thinks,
that army bus ahead. It's Easy Company. Got to halt it.
and he does. In the next panel, we see that the bus has stopped. We can see that it's got written on the side, the Easy Co Express, which is very amusing. Sounds like the sort of band that might have supported menswear at some point in the past. They seem to have stopped outside of a very large installation. That's the only word I've got for it. So Bats has stopped on his bike and a couple of soldiers have got down. There's a younger officer standing next to Bulldozer. This younger officer introduces himself to the Cape Crusader.
I'm Lieutenant Wilson, Batman. We heard of Rock's escape, but haven't seen or hear of him. Right, Bulldozer?
Right, sir.
Since Easy's the top company here, we go from base to base, training other outfits and new weapons. Right now, we're heading for Kleindorf, near the East German border.
And as Wilson is talking, we see that Batman is looking up and there's a sort of reflective surface, like a window or a giant mirror above this, on the wall outside this installation, above the top of the bus, and we can see the reflection of a uniform with a big blue P on the back and the white hair of Sgt Rock. Lieutenant Wilson continues in the first panel of page 10.
The army can't be too well prepared, what with the enemy poised for action. Let's roll, Bulldozer.
Gesture with his thumb for them to get back on the bus, but Batman, still standing astride his motorbike, thinks to himself,
Rock, he's sitting atop the baggage rack.
Yep, Batman is not going to go away. He's going to follow him, I think. The next panel is Bats speeding along on a motorbike as he thinks to himself,
So, Easy's hiding him. Can't blame him. They'd give their lives for Rock. I'll just tail along secretly and see what develops.
A slow dissolve, a scene-setting caption.
Kleindorf, a German town caught in the Cold War freeze, a few miles from a border bristling with men and guns.
Yep, a nice European-looking town, capably rendered by Mr. Aparo. Bats is looking around, thinking,
Easy's bivouacked at the base outside town. I'll hang out here and wait.
And as evening falls...
Yep, Bats hasn't moved, and it's a very interesting way this has been drawn over these two panels. We seem to be in the same spot, but the sky's got darker. It's very nice work from Mr. Aparo. Hopefully there'll be room to put this in the socials. Bats observes.
Lieutenant Wilson, Easy's CO. Must be in some official business.
Yes, we can see him driving off.
Then, as the old clock tower strikes 7...
Yes, there's a massive crong, crong, crong. Batman looks up at the clock tower, which has been established in the previous panel, rising high up above the town, and he observes,
My God! On the clock! It's Rock!
Batman must have astonishing vision because it's not very clear from this final panel of page 10, but we get a better look in the first panel of page 11. We can see that, indeed, it's not just Sgt Rock that's at the top of this clock tower. There's a weird sort of diorama statue thing of a guy in armour on horseback fighting a dragon, and we can see that there's a fisticuffs type situation going on in front of it. This is what Batman has spotted. The caption at the top of page 11 reads,
Instantly, the Batman soars toward the bizarre battle.
Yep, as the clock continues to chime,
Crong, crong.
yep, we see Bats swinging in on a line and getting closer, and we can see that Rock, still in his prison uniform, is punching out a man in a brown overcoat. There is another
Crong.
sound effect, and there's a crack as we see Rock's head collide with the mace belonging to the statue of the man on horseback. It's all very messy. If you could read along, listeners, you'd be making my job a lot easier. And the caption reads...
And the next moment...
Yeah, it seems to be that the mace seems to be part of the mechanism, actually. Striking the dragon seems to be what's making the crong, because Batman sees that Rock is down and thinks...
That mace lands again, Rock will be kaput.
Yeah, the mace does indeed swing again with another crong, and Batman is lucky enough to pull Rock out of the way as the guy in the overcoat who Sgt Rock was fighting runs out a handy doorway to get off the top of the clock. Does this make sense, Peter?
This is very, very convoluted, but we'll go back to this.
Right. Rock sort of comes to, yelling, Let me go! It was him! Cathcart! I had hold of him! He ain't no ghost!
No, Rock, you're too groggy. It couldn't have been Cathcart. He's dead. You've got to forget him.
I tell you, it was him! Solid flesh and bone! I followed him here and...
Suddenly...
Yep, a voice comes from down on the ground. Remember, Batman and Sgt Rock are standing at the top of this very high clock tower. And from the ground, we see a couple of vehicles with MP written on them, and a military police officer yells up at the lads saying,
Rock, surrender or we'll open fire!
MPs, cries Rock. They ain't taking me. I gotta use your bat rope. And he reaches for Batman's line and then swings off and away in the next panel as the soldiers all fire at him.
Pow, 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 pow!
Very dynamic. All this talk of MPs and Cathcart. We should have got Tom Harris to do a voice for this episode. Maybe we will. Maybe there'll be time to somehow do that. Maybe see if we can find and get him a cameo. Anyway, Batman starts to climb down in the next panel, thinking,
Rock got away. He was so sure it was Cathcart. Maybe I'd better check it out.
and there's a slow dissolve and a caption.
Hours later, a lone motorcyclist rides into the remains of an old courtyard.
Yes, see Batman on his bike, the headlight casting ahead.
Quickly, the masked manhunter studies the gritty soil.
Yep, Batman down on his knees, the spotlight obviously cast by the headlamp on his motorbike, and he's scrabbling around in the ground, and suddenly he thinks,
Here they are, after all these years. What in blazes?
But we don't know what surprised him at this point, but a caption tells us.
End part 2. Part 3 explodes next.
We arrive at the top of page 13, part 3.
The coward who came in from the Cold War.
Gosh.
Next morning, a grim figure strides into Army HQ.
Yes, Batman is back in the office of the General who we met earlier in the story. The officer looks surprised as Batman says,
Okay, General, whatever game you're playing, it's over. I dug these up where Corporal Dan Cathcart was executed years ago.
With that, Batman drops a handful of empty shells onto the desk in front of the General.
Blanks. Every one of them. Each rifle in that firing squad was loaded with blanks. Cathcart wasn't shot. He's still alive. Sgt Rock wasn't seeing a ghost, and you knew it all along. I want to know why.
And we see, got a good shot of the General here, and we can see that his name on his badge is Tyler. So obviously, if Roy Thomas was writing this, he would have made him an uncle of Rex Tyler.
Of course.
Or brother or cousin or something. Mm-hmm. Anyway, the General looks a little bit guilty and says, Okay, Batman, here's the full top-secret story. During the war, Cathcart was an intelligence agent, posing as a Nazi, getting valuable info behind enemy lines. Next couple of panels over the heavy black border because they're in Flashback City, New Jersey. But the Nazis got suspicious, especially von Buch, one of their top intelligence experts. And we see a couple of Nazi soldiers, one with short, cropped brown hair, and another older man with black greying hair. The older man with black greying hair is holding some kind of document in front of him, and he's saying,
This man, he might be an Americana spy. I want all our agents to watch his every movement.
General Tyler's narration continues. If Cathcart was going to keep operating, we had to fool the Nazis. Luckily, von Buch was captured one day, and we see this general being huckled, as we would say here, by a few armed American soldiers. General's narration at the top of page 14. Our ingenious scheme was for Cathcart to play coward while a member of Easy Company. We made sure von Buch observed the phony execution, then let him smuggle a message back to his own lines. Yeah, and what we see here, obviously it was von Buch who walked past the execution when Sgt Rock was remembering it earlier on, and what we see in the first panel of page 14 is a figure in a big hat, a big coat, looking up as another figure drops a message, rolled up a piece of paper, looks out the window of a high prison cell. There's a hint of a full moon, so you could take the hint of a drink if you like. That's obviously the message being smuggled back. Back in the present day with General Tyler and Batman, as the General continues, von Buch told his Nazi pals the stupid Americans had executed one of their own intelligence men for panicking at the bulge. We couldn't tell Rock the execution was a phony. He and everyone else had to play out their roles perfectly, so it wouldn't leak later to the Nazis that Cathcart was alive.
But that was years ago, during the war. Why is Rock still being fooled and persecuted by the army he loves?
Because we're still in a war. A Cold War. The next panel is in flashback mode, narrated by the General, as he says, Once Cathcart was officially dead, he became an even better spy. Recently, he's been operating in East Germany, and we see Cathcart with a pair of bolt clippers crawling underneath a barbed wire fence that he's just cut his way through. That's very interesting. General Tyler turns to the map in the final panel of page 14, saying, He found their intelligence knew the exact location of every American unit and their weapons along the entire border. In a shooting war, we'd be wiped out in minutes. The General gesturing across the map to make his point. In the first panel of page 15, the General continues, We switched our units completely. The East Germans knew it a week later. Obviously, they had a very clever spy in our own ranks.
So, Cathcart was tracking him down and Rock kept getting in the way.
Exactly. We had to salt Rock away before he blew Cathcart's real identity to the spy Cathcart's out there right now trying to catch.
But so is Rock out there, made half crazy trying to track down the ghost who haunts him, Cathcart.
That's too bad. But so much is at stake, Rock's expendable. We have to nab him, even kill him if necessary.
Over my dead body, General. I'm going to find Rock first and tell him the truth.
That Batman runs for the door. I hope, listeners, this is making sense and you can keep up with what's going on, because I can't.
Shortly.
Yeah, Batman's cut along on his motorbike thinking to himself,
Easy Company could still be hiding him, but they've left for their next training base. Must catch them before they get there.
And we see in the next panel, beautifully rendered, beautifully coloured, Batman speeding along on his bike. Behind the Easy Company bus, we pass a sign that reads, "Border checkpoint ahead, all US Army vehicles must turn left." A sign saying turn left and talks of Cold
War.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of Doctor Who episodes being
referenced
here. It's very amusing.
Yeah.
Hope Kenny finds this amusing. Bats is caught up with the bus and he thinks,
"There's the Easy Express. Now to flag it down."
But suddenly, the big bus picks up speed, and moments later...
yes, with a massive crash, the Easy Company bus drives right through the border checkpoint, breaking the barrier and sending soldiers running. Bats, coming up behind on his motorbike, thinks,
"It's busting through."
Instantly, the Batman swerves off the main road.
yes, we can see there's a very obvious Great Escape homage going on here as Bats on his motorbike accelerates towards the big, large barbed wire fence, thinking,
"It's crazy. The bus rolled right on into East Germany. Every aboard, they'll either be shot or captured."
and with a vroom, Bats on his bike vaults over the barbed wire fence, thinking,
"Got to cross the border myself, undetected, this way."
go for it. A slow dissolve.
Half an hour later...
Yes, we see Bats lurking amongst some foliage, which he hasn't done for a while on the podcast, and we can see the Easy bus, but we can also see that every member of Easy has been lined up with presumably some Eastern Army officers pointing their guns at them. Bats is thinking,
"Easy. All prisoners."
And as the GIs are marched into a nearby barracks...
yes, we see a familiar dark-haired American officer shaking hands with one of the Germans. Bats, off camera, thinks,
Huh? Lieutenant Wilson, shaking hands with that East German officer.
oh my goodness. Bats has climbed a little higher up the tree in the first panel of page 17 as he thinks,
He's being allowed to escape. My God, Wilson is the spy among us.
yeah, we can see Lieutenant Wilson almost waving casually to the East German officer who's still pointing a gun at him as Wilson walks off into another part of the forest. Bats follows him, thinking,
Of course. As Easy moved from base to base, he'd learn every unit's strength and location, then slip the info to a contact. That's what he was doing back in Kleindorf that night. Cathcart was trailing him. Rock spoiled things by jumping Cathcart in the clock tower, and Wilson must have driven the bus through the barrier himself.
gosh. Bats gets a very dramatic, moody close-up here.
He knew Cathcart was closing in, and Easy had outlived its usefulness. Now, while Easy rots in an East German jail, he'll explain his escape with some phony story.
We can see in the next panel Lieutenant Wilson is walking towards some small, what look like farm buildings, but Bats has noticed another figure down in front of him, a man with blonde hair wearing a brown overcoat. Bats spots him and thinks,
What? Somebody following Wilson? It has to be Cathcart.
the caption to the final panel on page 17 dramatically reads,
But...
and Bats thinks,
Oh no, Wilson spotted him.
as Wilson turns at the waist and with a kapow shoots Cathcart at very close range. The first panel of page 18, Bats has run over to Cathcart and kneels down over him saying,
Cathcart, it is you, not a ghost. Are you all right?
in a very pained Cathcart says,
Forget me. Get back across the border and tell him about Wilson. He must be stopped. Go!
Bats slopes off in the next panel, thinking,
What a man, that Cathcart. He'll die there. But he's right, I've got to complete his mission.
but unseen by Bats, lurking in the shadows of the nearby farm buildings, is Lieutenant Wilson, who pulls a gun and says,
Hold it, Batman!
Bats turns and says,
You rotten traitor!
Wilson, pointing his pistol directly at Bats, as I'm miming now for the benefit of our YouTube viewers, says,
I'm not American, but a German, and my name isn't Wilson. Now a bullet ends your career, and I resume mine for the fatherland.
Suddenly, from out of nowhere, a voice yells, Lieutenant? Batman? Wilson yells,
What?
and Batman cries,
Rock, shoot Wilson! He's a traitor!
it's Rock that's on the scene. Rock says in the next panel, Huh? You gotta be kidding.
I'm not Rock. He's a spy.
To which Wilson says,
Batman's lying. He's the spy. I'm taking him back to face justice.
and a very confused looking Rock, holding a pistol of his own in the final panel of page 18, looks from left to right saying, You're both confusing me. I trailed Cathcart across the border an hour ago. I had to catch him once and for all, but he vanished again. I guess he really is a ghost.
No, Rock, it was Cathcart, but Wilson shot him. Now you must kill Wilson before he finishes us both.
The troubled Rock says, Shoot the lieutenant? But I killed a GI years ago, Cathcart, and he's haunted me ever since.
You didn't kill him. The execution was a phony. Shoot Wilson now, you must.
To which the lieutenant says,
Sergeant Rock, I order you to believe me. You're a damn fool.
Wilson turns towards Sergeant Rock, raising his pistol in his direction, yelling,
I'll kill you.
but he yells in turn, as with a kapow, Sergeant Rock fires on him. Got there first. Wilson's down on the ground in the next panel, Rock and Bats standing over him. The Rock says, No GI uses a crowd word like that. You are right, Batman.
You snapped out of it just in time, Rock. Come on, our job's not done yet.
A bit of a slow dissolve, caption for the final panel of page 19.
Soon.
And we see Batman and Sgt Rock with a
Walk.
and a
Wham.
taking out a couple of East German officers, and the caption for the first panel on page 20.
And shortly, at the same border checkpoints.
Yep, they've all managed to get away. Batman is driving the Easy Company Express. Definitely putting this panel on the socials. A couple of members of Easy are on the roof of the bus firing back at these German soldiers. There's various pows and Buddhas and pings and stuff going on. Rock is hanging at one of the windows of the bus as it speeds along, yelling, "One side for the Easy Express." And one of the others yells,
Guess these clowns didn't know we had round-trip tickets, Rock.
which is a lol, as they continue to fire and we see some of the soldiers dropping. There we go. Nobody won during the Cold War, listeners. Anyway, a slow dissolve.
And sometime later.
Yep, see Sergeant Rock smartening himself up. He's probably just had a shave by the looks of things. Bat standing behind him. The Rock is saying, "I feel like a guy waking up after a nightmare. The army's dropped all charges against me, and Easy's minus one lousy spy. But Cathcart's execution still haunts me." Batman and Rock, who's put his shirt on, looks a lot brighter. They're entering another room, obviously some kind of infirmary situation. Bat says,
Maybe this'll convince you.
and we see another man standing in front of them, an arm in a sling, a couple of cuts in his face as Batman says,
Sergeant Rock, meet Dan Cathcart.
and Cathcart turns and says,
Hello, Rock.
to which Rock exclaims, "Blazes!" and walks forward, putting a hand on Cathcart's shoulder, saying, "You ain't no spook. It's you, in the flesh."
Yes, Sergeant. A bit banged up after crawling across the border with a traitor slugging me, but I'll live.
And they all laugh. There's a bit of and a slow dissolve.
Shortly.
And in the final panel, as Batman and Cathcart look on, we see the assembled members of Easy Company. They've all got a bed sheet or something between them, and they're bouncing Sergeant Rock up and down in the air as they all cry, "Hurrah for Rock!" To which Batman looks on and smiles and says,
Guess the nightmare is really over.
a small caption tells us we have reached.
The end.
Well,
My goodness.
I enjoyed that a lot more in the performing than I did in the reading.
This is a bit of a weird one. It feels a bit of a mashup of previous Brave and Bold stories. I'll be honest.
Yes.
Rock being obsessed by someone from his past is basically the night Batman sold his soul, where he sees Hitler and he keeps following Hitler everywhere. Or was it Hitler? Check out our episode for our thoughts on that one.
Yes.
And also, the fight in the clock tower, was there not a similar thing on the Angel, the Rock, the very first one?
There was certainly some high altitude antics.
Yeah, I'm sure there's something in a clock tower there as well. Also, the motorbike taking a different diversion and leaping over something was from another Brave and Bold. I think it was a Wildcat one, maybe?
Yeah, there was.
Yeah.
It could be. It does ring a bell vaguely.
It does feel a bit like Brave and Bold Greatest Hits.
Sure.
But saying that, it was very enjoyable. It was convoluted, but that's what we expect from a Bob Haney story. Zany Haney.
It wasn't as convoluted as some. I mean, reading it through, when I was reading it through in the prep and doing the cast list and all that, I was like, oh, God, it's going to take his ages, quite a lot. But it wasn't as painful as I thought. It's ultimately, when you boil it down, quite a boring sort of, I thought this guy was dead, he's not, and he catches the real traitor sort of thing, which does again feel quite familiar on its own.
Yeah.
It feels like it can almost be interchangeable with any other Brave and the Bold or...
That's kind of how Mark Miller finishes every story he writes these days.
Really?
It's like, yes, the second last issue of every story he writes is, and here's the secret traitor.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
At least that's what it seems like. He certainly went through a phase of that.
Oh dear. Was that after he rotated everything by 180 degrees and put someone who wore a white costume into a black costume and put in some violence and some Rudy stuff? I don't know.
There we are.
Being a bit cynical there. Mark has written some excellent stuff. You know, I'm very fond of him.
Yes.
Definitely. It's an interesting, I mean, the whole Sergeant Rock feeling a bit mental thing is very similar to the last one.
Yeah,
And in many ways, you get the sense it could have played out very similarly, even if Batman hadn't actually been involved. Batman's not really too involved, and he's just an observer, sort of.
Well, he did uncover the blanks and find out exactly what happened.
Let's talk about that. I mean, what's the likelihood that they would still have been there 30 years after the event?
Yeah, very true. Very true. But hey, he's not the world's greatest detective for nothing.
It's a bit of a stretch, isn't it?
One thing that fascinates me is the level of international incident that has happened.
Yes.
With Western soldiers basically invading the East at the height of the Cold War.
Yeah. And shooting a whole bunch of soldiers.
Yeah.
And then running off.
Yeehaw.
Playing at the Italian Job or something.
One side for the Easy Express.
Yeah.
It's Rock.
That is crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, well. Any chance to break out the word verdammt is always good.
And as I said, like, reading it at first, I thought, oh, this is going to be terrible. But it was actually, it was okay. The cover, obviously, is slightly misleading.
Yes, very much so.
Batman does not ride in his motorbike and stop a moonlit, spooky firing squad situation.
Executioner, no.
I've got a few foreign reprints this one to share, a couple of which have new cover art.
Oh, interesting.
So make sure you check those out, listeners. A couple of which reuse the same cover image, but the other cover art sort of suggests a sort of Phantom Soldier type situation.
Okay.
Yeah, it's, I don't know, I'm going to be honest, I think out of all of Batman Sgt Rock ones we've done, it's probably is it the weakest, but it's certainly the flattest, I think.
Okay.
But I mean, there's some interesting stuff. Like I like the fact that Easy Company kidnapped Batman to get him involved in helping their pal. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and fair enough. A left hook from Bulldozer that could take out Batman. That's fine.
It probably would. And I think we have to, for the sake of for the whole point of us doing these ones, I think we have to agree this is enough one story.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, this has to be a
Because it's the older Sergeant Rock. Batman is not involved in any of the flashbacks.
Yeah.
It certainly has a relationship with Rock, but it doesn't seem like it's one that dates back 30 odd years.
Yeah.
So
there's no like continuity references or anything there, but obviously there is a history there.
Yeah.
So, Again, it's one of these Brave and Bold stories that you love so much that don't take place in Gotham City at all.
I know.
Apart from like the opening, even if it is
Gotham
City in the opening panel.
The opening page isn't really very clear either.
Again, it's one of these Brave and Bold stories where Batman's casually strolling down the street one day.
Yes.
Admiring a poster, as you do, having a think about his friend.
As you do. I think it's at night, though, given that... but I know what you mean. We should say that Jim Apato's artwork is lovely in this. He only does the cutting to outside of somewhere that we've already seen inside of a couple of points. There's a nice shot when we see outside the plane. There's a nice bit where we see outside, wherever it is, Bats is talking to General Tyler. It's, some nice detailing of like the aeroplanes flying overhead and stuff.
Lots of flashback action as well.
Yes.
Again, Bob Haney loves his flashbacks.
Sort of keeps the reader on the toes and keeps it motoring on, actually. It is good, obviously, but I mean, it is very enjoyable. I mean, it's just some of the things you just sort of go, the casual attitude to what the state of European politics was at the time just does make you sort of go, well, hang on. Just simplify things. It reminds me, there's an issue of Web of Spider. I think it's Web of Spider-Man or Peter Parker's Spectacular Spider-Man. When I was reading everything Marvel circa, run about 1986, 1987, and Peter's in the UK, and they involve the IRA.
Gasp.
In the story, and you literally see a couple of like guys in leather jackets blowing something up, and someone yells, "Give Ireland back to the Irish." And you sort of go, I remember at the time going, that's a very simplified way of looking at things.
Yeah.
Obviously from the outsider. Same one has, I think it's Peter Parker. And you see Peter struggling with the British coins that Aunt May gave him. And he ends up giving them all to the bellboy. And the bellboy's like, yes, a few more. I always think the line, a few more like that and I can bloody retire.
Yes.
I'll see if I can find that panel.
That's quite amusing.
So yeah, it just puts me in mind that sort of thing, like in the same way that people from other territories don't really quite understand the nuance of everything that's going on. Because as you say, that would have been a major incident. Yeah. A bunch of American soldiers driving over the border and shooting up a checkpoint and blowing away. That would have instigated like quite a major sort of repercussion. So it's interesting that Haney just goes, tight. Yeah.
It's funny because reading through the story, I wasn't even thinking about the Cold War or anything really at the time until we saw the map on the wall that has got East and West Germany. Yes. And you think, of course it's then. It's that's contemporary for the time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's 30 odd years now since the wall came down and stuff, but when you and I were growing up, that was
Thanks, Hoff for that. That's good.
When you and I were growing up, that was still very much the case.
Yeah.
It's all very interesting. Lots going on. I'm just a little bit exhausted after the telling because it's not particularly straightforward.
The Bob Haney stories are always dense. Always dense.
Yeah. Moving on to the contemporary correspondence, issue 120. The Brave and Bold mailbag has a few paragraphs on issue 117. That point where they weren't printing full letters, just little snippets. After mention of a Jim Aparo fan club magazine being started by someone called Mike Gallagher and someone called Gary Arkle demanding a Brave and Bold format without Batman. And they move on to 117 and it goes like this.
Andy Beck said it was a wonderful way to start his subscription. Fred Carlson described it as indescribable.
Oh, wow.
The best written and drawn comic in the world.
How would you describe it? It's indescribable. What's your favourite Beatles album? Anyway.
And 117 followed that tradition, cheered David Singh. When someone reads a blockbuster like Nightmare Without End, he just has to write a letter congratulating those responsible, wrote Warren Morrison. Haney has the uncanny ability to make me enjoy a hero I don't even care for. When I saw Sgt Rock was Batman's co-star, I wasn't going to buy the issue. Boy, am I glad I changed my mind.
Gosh, Doug McCoffey also isn't a Rock rooter, but admitted to enjoying the story. A real gasser was the way Jay Wilson put it. Aparo is one of the most fantastic artists, and Haney lays the scripts on us too, and deserves the same type of praise. J. Douglas Willington endorsed it as excellent, and Tom Scott claimed it as the most realistic tale I have read to date, topping past B&B triumphs. Most realistic, wow.
Bob Haney proved to be a natural with a war tale, and I'm glad you're editing GI Combat, wrote Will Nash. Haney honed a honey of a yarn, the tank that missed D-Day in a recent issue, if you can still snare a copy, says the editor.
Interesting.
Ray Haydock stated he was impressed. Ken Wolfe said it was worth reading.
Oh my goodness, talk about damning with faint praise.
And Evan Davis, a B&B booster for 6 years, thought it was great. But do we always have to show Sgt Rock at his worst? In 96, he was thought to be a traitor. In 108, he was court-martialed. In 117, he was being discharged. But keep up the great work. 40 years from now, I'll be picking up 354, or maybe 50 years from now. See what confidence I have in you guys?
Mate, sorry to spoil things for you, Evan, but they cancelled this book in 1983 and replaced it with Batman and the Outsiders. Apologies.
Yeah.
There's a little editorial response to Evan, which reads, "We haven't checked your arithmetic, Evan, but let's hope we're all around by then." Anyway, as for Rock's problems, we try to involve him in a dramatic situation, develop his characterisation to play against Batman's heroic stance. That's fair enough. Joe Malloy thought the plot fine, but a bit contrived, and Lou, oh my goodness, Demerlieu, deplored it as the worst story he's read in 3 years. Tisk.
Gasp. So yeah, so that's interesting variety of responses there.
Very much so.
Mm-hmm.
We're really sort of just doing these as a sort of sense of completism in a way, aren't we?
Without a doubt, yeah.
But it wasn't bad. I enjoyed it a lot more in the reading than I did in the preparation, so that probably works, doesn't it? That works.
Listeners, do you think it works? Please let us know. You can email us at theearth2podcast@gmail.com. Make sure you follow us on social media, because as David said, he's got some lovely bonus material for you this week, and indeed every week. So thank you very much, David, actually, for sourcing all this wonderful bonus material.
It's a pleasure, Treasure. I mean, it genuinely is. It's like, every so often I love scrolling back down the Instagram and sort of going, oh yeah, because it's almost a parallel thing to what we're doing in the podcast. It's sort of giving you further context and what have you. And I kind of like to think of the Instagram and the Facebook pages are sort of like magazine accompaniments.
Yes.
You know, when we're just giving you more content to bolster just the storytelling. So be it scans or original art, or scans of reprints, or foreign editions, or action figures, or relevant characters, or house ads for the comics that we're covering. It's all out there. And so yeah, please check it out. The Instagram is just the Earth 2 Podcast on Instagram, which is also what we are on Facebook. I think that's right.
And Twitter, we're at podcast_Earth2, and it's the number 2 for all of our socials.
If you're feeling generous, you could go to wherever it is you receive your podcasts and give us a nice review. That'd be lovely. Tell your pals, get them involved. Feeling even more generous, you go to our coffee page and buy Peter the price of a beverage for him to consume as he edits out all of our fluffs from all of our recording.
Which is quite a lot this episode.
It wasn't too bad. It could have been worse. We've had worse. We've had better, but we've had worse. It wasn't anywhere near as much of a chore as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Which helps.
And if you enjoy strange DC war stories, then you should check out our friends at the Weird Warriors podcast, because they cover all of the Weird War Tales series, plus other bonus special mission episodes.
They just did a very interesting issue of Wolverine as a special mission.
I've still to listen to that one.
It's very, very good.
Cool.
It's very enjoyable. Yeah, we love Max and Rich, undoubtedly. Anyway, so yes, that's the end of Recommendation Corner.
Indeed.
On that bombshell.
I've been Peter.
And I've been David. We'll see you again soon on
the Earth 2 Podcast.
Transmatter cube activated. Return coordinates set for Earth Prime.
Hello, listeners. Say hello, Peter.
Hello, listeners.
Yes, we're coming to you live from Cathcart Station for a very silly thing. We have just gone on our very first post-episode recording road trip to take a very amusing photograph, which you'll probably see on the socials, if not by now, at some point in the next couple of days.
Yes.
Isn't that right, Peter?
It most certainly is.
Yes. So, on that bombshell,
I've been Peter.
and I've been David. We'll see you soon on
the Earth 2
podcast.